if everyone believes everything that's not forbidden is allowed, then you need hundreds of rules. But if you know that people think first what could be the right thing to do, then you get empowerment of the people.
That's Hiltrud Werner, a business audit specialist and a former board member at Volkswagen. In 2016, after Volkswagen's disastrous emission scandal came to light, Hiltrud took on the challenging role of Group Audit Director for the company, and later as the head of integrity and legal affairs. This was no easy task. With the car manufacturer mired in legal and financial penalties, Hiltrud and her team needed to not only investigate the root causes of this ethical breakdown, but they also had the enormous job of rebuilding the culture of the company and restoring global trust in the brand. This is BCG on Compliance, a podcast that explores today's most pressing criminal trends and how compliance professionals are adapting to stay ahead of that curve. I'm Hanjo Seibert. Katharina Hefter leads BCG Risk and Compliance in Central Europe and worked closely with Hiltrud during the monitorship at Volkswagen. In this episode, Katharina joins us as a guest host and reflects with Hiltrud on that intense time and how Volkswagen was able to reimagine and transform its culture.
Hiltrud, great to see you again. It's been a couple of years ago already that we've been working together.
Thank you, Katharina, for inviting me for this recording. It's great to see you again.
Could you briefly talk us through a bit your career trajectory prior to becoming responsible for legal and integrity at VW?
Yes, so my first 10 years were basically really IT trainings, IT consultancy, IT projects, organizing migrations. So after 10 years in that area, I was audited by internal audit, and I found this a very interesting experience for myself. And I ended up applying for a job in internal audit. So my next career steps brought me into corporate internal audit departments in 4 different companies at BMW, at MAN, at ZF, Friedrichshafen, and lately then at Volkswagen. And that is also where I was corporate audit director before I became board member.
Yeah, and then Hiltrud, you took on what I would call one of the most important and challenging roles at that time in corporate Germany, if not Europe, if not broader than that. Looking back at that time, how did you cope with that challenge, and also what opportunities did you see?
I didn't look so much into challenges and opportunities. For me, I had a broader picture in mind. I saw the 800,000 people at Germany that were working in the automotive industry, and I had been asked to help to rebuild trust into the automotive industry for Germany. So I felt honored. And at the same time, of course, I knew that it was a big job, but I was not afraid because the whole company wanted to overcome the crisis and wanted to clean up the scandal, to rebuild trust with customers, with regulators, and also with the whole society. So I did not feel alone, and I felt it was also an honor to get into such a position where you can really make an impact for the whole company.
And Hiltrud, thinking back to those days, you were just mentioning that the task at hand was to rebuild trust, which is an enormous endeavor. What do you think were the root causes that fell to the situation and then also drove the need to really change the culture of Volkswagen?
First of all, let me say that within Volkswagen, I met a lot of great people, hundreds of thousands of people who really felt as ashamed about what has happened as you can really think. So, of course, it's always that fine line that you do not want to destroy the pride of those people that are hardworking and getting great cars to the customers, and at the same time seeing that the culture needed to change because it did not prevent this great misconduct to happen. So our root cause analysis took years really into the history of the company for decades. And one of the factors that we found was that there was very little job rotation, there was very little speak up culture, and people had a lot of hierarchical thinking in their mind. So that element needed to be tackled in a cultural shift so that there was more open discussions between employees of every different level of the organization. And that took a while to establish mechanisms for that.
I think you refer to a couple of ingredients that help to establish an ethically strong company culture. If you were to summarize the most important ingredients.
Well, first of all, I think the whole organization needs a very good risk awareness. If you come to a department and they say, we do not have risks here because we don't handle cash, then you immediately see that the ability to analyze risks in their own field, what could go wrong and how could it impact the company, was underdeveloped. So risk awareness is a very important key to a good culture. The second is a speak up culture where you listen to people who are in doubt, who feel that the surroundings or the decisions they have to work on put them into a dilemma. And of course, how you deal with errors. Is there a clear distinction between an error that was not intended and misconduct? I also believe that it is important to have many people that do not have chimney careers, that the company promotes careers where you change basically the areas of responsibility so that you understand the bigger picture of the company and not just the task at hand in your own little part of it.
From your experience, how do especially regulation policies and integrity play out in the daily business, and how does it fit together, come together?
Yeah, the biggest misconception about integrity that I faced was that most people thought this is an element that is only black or white. Either you act with integrity or you are a fraudster. And I was of the opinion that integrity is a skill set where you can get better every day and that you can train integrity, that you can, for example, get better how you deal in dilemma situations, how you address them, how you understand what is your area of decision making and when do you have to escalate, for example. So integrity for me is doing the right thing even if no one is looking. But at the same time, integrity is also a skill set for managers and for employees that gives you the strong ability to do that right thing under pressure. And we always said that corporate integrity is the strongest element to prevent bureaucracy in the company, to prevent overregulation, because if everyone believes everything that's not forbidden is allowed, then you need hundreds of rules. But if you know that people think first what could be the right thing to do, you also get empowerment of the people. And this empowerment element was also a very important element to get the buy-in into that change. And it made people feel that they have to think. They are not just, as we say, human resources. They are human bodies with their own mindset. And that is important for the corporate culture.
And how can leaders support the humans, the employees in the organization to take the right decisions in the gray zone, even when nobody is watching?
That is indeed a very good question. First of all, I believe leaders can do a lot to promote a good culture if they always ask questions. Are you comfortable with my decisions? Did you understand my decisions? Is there anything I can support you with? So, not just saying, you have to take my decisions because I'm the boss, but to make the effort to explain decisions.
And when you look back at the levers you were pulling at Volkswagen to drive that culture change, what would you say were the biggest and most impactful levers?
A big element from my department was the network of integrity ambassadors. So these integrity ambassadors could explain their own colleagues how to understand the new code of conduct. If I have to summarize it in one sentence, what was our, let's say, method to deal with that big task at hand? It was working top down and bottom up at the same time. So top down, of course, in helping to set up a new tone from the top, supportive tools from the boardroom to the top management, to the managers, but at the same time using the integrity ambassadors bottom up to discuss the latest changes, to discuss what we want to achieve with their own colleagues in their own departments.
How did you evolve your leadership style over the last years, and especially during that intense period at VW?
Well, for me, it was also important to have a lot of people around me on a regular basis that challenged me, that often had different opinions. Another former board member of Volkswagen, Gerd Godewert, he wrote a book, A Bird in the Aquarium, where he described that the higher you come in the organization, the more windows turn into mirrors. So it's difficult to see outside and to get honest feedback and to make sure that I always have people that I can ask anything and I could rely on the fact that they would honestly give me feedback. That was something where I put more and more effort on in my career. It helped me as a leader immensely. I also understood over time that you have to give your people also hope. You have to be convincing that the tasks that we have are manageable and that they can be solved. And basically that you always, not just talk about the light at the end of the tunnel, but that you enlighten also any dark corner that there might be. And that it is also the task of a leader to be always a little bit more optimistic than the rest of the organization. Luckily, fits my nature. I'm always optimistic.
Leading with optimism, I would say, and a glass that is rather half full than than half empty, right? You mentioned that you've kept around you also people who disagree with you. When looking for new talent, new leaders in your space, what are you looking for? What matters to you when hiring and nominating leaders in compliance?
Basically, it is, from my point of view, very important that everyone in compliance can speak the language of the business. The skills that you need to be a good chief compliance officer or to be responsible for procurement or whatever, that can be trained. But the character needs to be there and the understanding of the business needs also to be there. I always looked for the right character. In our hiring process, the whole idea was that there is no HR process without thinking about mindset, about integrity, whether it was hiring or whether it was promotion. It needed to be part of the thinking of each and every person in HR and not just my hiring strategy, that we are not just looking for the best numbers, but for the right mindset.
Looking a bit beyond your journey and the culture change at Volkswagen, we are in a time where speed is increasing, uncertainty increasing, geopolitical tensions around us. What is your view around the challenges that leaders today are facing in Germany, Europe, and potentially beyond?
One of the biggest challenge comes from geopolitics, but at the same time, I would say for leaders, it is immensely difficult because societal expectations and demands towards economic actors, especially in multinational corporations, has been increasing. So that means businesses are very often seen as competent to deliver the promises they made in terms of their products, but they are often still not seen as ethical institutions doing the right thing also to improve society. And it's all coming back to trust, because trust drives the capital of the company. And how shall leaders in the current world build trust in the company in the most efficient way? That is a huge challenge. If we are honest with ourselves, the regulations that come from the European Union or from German, they seem to be regulations built on mistrust. The laws seem to limit the entrepreneurship. A lot of business leaders see that the government is not always giving them enough space to come up with a solution that fits the company needs and the societal needs.
Yeah, and in those challenging times, Hiltrud, also, I think our listeners would probably be curious to hear also a bit about your personal plans and what opportunities you see for the years ahead for you.
I think I'm now in the phase of my life where I can give back to the society. I try to engage as much as I can in an advisory role, not only in the supervisory boards where I serve, but also in trusts and foundations. Currently, I'm also writing on a book again. I'm also giving speeches in different companies about leadership, about compliance, and I try to encourage people not to see compliance as documental compliance, but as something that has to start in the mindset, and that it's not just a 9-to-5 job to do your job, and then after 5 p.m. you have to tick the boxes on a compliance template or whatever, but that needs to be integrated into everyone's role. And I talk about compliance by design in the organization, from the very first product ideas to delivering it to the market. And I think that is the right way forward. I try to be an ambassador for good corporate culture, and I think young leaders are seeing all these challenges ahead of them, and we have to help them to want such a job, to want to become managers. We want the best people in management. So we have to organize that they feel comfortable in taking on responsibility. And there is a long way to go, I believe.
Thank you, Hiltrud. Thank you so much for the inspiration, for the optimism, for the trust into our future generations. And it was a great pleasure speaking with you.
Thank you, Katharina. It's always good to talk to you.
That was Hiltrud Werner, Volkswagen's former head of integrity and legal affairs. She was speaking with Katharina Hefter, who leads BCG Risk and Compliance in Central Europe. What elements do you think are needed to build a corporate culture of integrity? Join the conversation by connecting with us on your podcast app, writing a review of the show, or emailing us at bcgoncompliance@bcg.com. Be sure to subscribe to get more insights from compliance innovators. I'm Hanya Seibert. Thanks for listening.